All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give everybody a minute to get logged in and settled, and then we'll get started. All right, people are still coming in the room. All right. My name is Martina James Nally, and I'm with the Governor's Conference on Aging, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining our series this week and this month. Last month was our first ever webinar, and we had over 400 attendees, and it was just a phenomenal response and experience, so thank you so much. Our webinar series was created by our conference planning committee when we had to postpone due to COVID. The conference, originally scheduled for May of 2020, has been postponed to May 17 and 18 of 2021. And in the meantime, we felt it was really important to be good stewards of our mission, our attendees, our sponsors, and our community partners. So in doing that, our conference planning committee decided creating a webinar series between now and the conference in May would be a great way to engage all of those different partners throughout the next 12 months. So we hope you'll join us on the fourth Tuesday of every month from 1 to 2 o'clock for each of these different webinars. Today is the first of a two-part series on social isolation, and we will be talking about social isolation and community-based services. Next month on August 25th, I hope you'll join us for the second part of our series, which will be social isolation in long-term care facilities. Before we get started and before I hand it over to our panelists and our moderator, I want to send a couple thank yous and do a little bit of housekeeping. First, we want to thank Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services and the Virginia Association for Area Agencies on Aging for really leading the charge of this conference. And with them, our steering committee. Without those three entities, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. So thank you to each of you. I encourage you to go to our website. You can see who each of those steering committee members are and who some of our sponsors are. To our sponsors, we thank you for your investment and your commitment and your dedication to the conference and to this webinar series. Without each of you, we wouldn't be able to do this as well. You can visit our 2020 sponsors tab and you will see each of our sponsors. I encourage you to take the time, while you may recognize many of these logos or names, take the time to click on their logos and it will take you to their websites. Because they really do mean a lot to us, to the conference, and making everything available to each of you, whether in webinar, whether post-webinar, or the conference itself. So I encourage you to take the time to invest a little of your time in them like they invest in us. Our webinar series is always available on our website. The current webinar is always posted, and you can register for upcoming webinars. You can also see past webinars, and you can see the recordings on our YouTube channel if you just click on this link. We want to make those available even after they are shown live, so we encourage you to take the time to go back and review those, and an email will go out after the webinar with all the information on how to access that. So today's webinar, as I've said, is the first of a two-part series addressing social isolation in community-based services. Social isolation was one of the key topics that came out of our first webinar, issues uncovered for older Virginians during the pandemic. Leading our webinar today will be our moderator, Regina Sayers, who's the Executive Director of the Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens, and our two panelists, James Sawyer, the Executive Director of Innovage Richmond PACE, and Kathy Vesley, President and CEO of Bay Aging. As I mentioned, on August 25th, we'll have the second part of this series, and I encourage you to go to our website and register for that. Our speakers will be Melissa Andrews, President and CEO of Leading Age Virginia, Sarah Lineberger, one of the lead epidemiologists from VDH and part of the task force for the governor's work on COVID-19, and Secretary Richard Produm, the Florida Department of Elder Affairs to speak on Project Vital and their work in long-term care facilities there. At this point, I appreciate each of you being here. I will hand over my control to Regina and James and Kathy. And one quick housekeeping, we encourage you guys, as you saw in emails, to come with questions, but as you have your questions throughout the presentations, please put them in the question box on your dashboard. And at the end of each of the presentations, at the end of the presentation, Regina and I will monitor those and we will get your questions answered live by our panelists. So thank you guys so much. And Regina, I'm handing it over to you and making sure that everybody is off mute.
Well, good afternoon, Martina. I hope you can hear me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And again, as Martina said, welcome to the Virginia Governor's Conference on Aging webinar today. And today's topic is social isolation and community-based services. We've all seen the statistics and effect of social isolation among the seniors before there was a pandemic. And even before COVID-19, which descended upon us this year, community-based organizations were working hard to connect seniors to services to provide social isolation. Now the pandemic has turned everything, as I say, upside down, inside out, and even new buzz phrase such as social distancing has become commonplace. I prefer physical distancing because no one really wants to social distance anyone. Suddenly, all age groups began to experience the effects of social isolation, and not just our seniors. If nothing else, the pandemic has brought to light that social isolation is a real issue and we need real solutions. The area agencies on aging, other community-based organizations, and PACE programs which serve seniors have started scrambling hurriedly to continue to offer services and began thinking of ways to combat social isolation amid a pandemic. This process was sort of like trying to balance a three-legged stool. If you're not careful and one of those legs isn't addressed, or if it gets too short, we know what can happen and the stool becomes unbalanced. So we had to combat social isolation on three levels: mental, combating depression, anxiety, feelings of suicide, alcoholism; physical, declining health among our seniors because of the physician's offices closing, dentist office closing, and even deconditioning of those individuals who have been attending physical therapy or occupational therapy. And then our third leg of that stool is our spiritual, attending to a person's faith system during this pandemic. We needed to answer these questions: how to provide services, who was going to provide those services, when, how often were we going to provide those services, and where to provide those services. Today's webinar will provide guidance on how to balance the three-legged stool using creative and innovative programs that will help you work smarter and hopefully not harder. Our presenters will offer best practice solutions to combat social isolation. Again, as Martina says, this is an interactive webinar, so please submit your questions in the question box, and you may want to address that question to the person whom you are directing the question. Questions will be answered following the presentations. Now, it is my honor to introduce our two distinguished and accomplished panelists today. First, we will hear from Kathy Massey. Kathy Massey is the president and CEO of Bay Aging, a nonprofit area agency on aging, serving the rural eastern coast of Virginia. In addition to traditional aging programs, Bay Aging provides senior housing, public transportation, and in-home transitional health care. In 2017, her agency and collaboration were awarded the John A. Hartford Foundation Business Innovation Award for forging a statewide coalition of area agencies on aging named VAAA Cares. VAAA Cares is contracted with multiple health systems and managed care organizations. Prior to joining Bay Aging in 1998, Kathy served for several years as the Deputy Commissioner of the Virginia Department for the Aging, and also a term as the Acting Commissioner for Virginia's Department for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and in other state leadership positions. Kathy graduated with degrees in history and sociology from the College of William and Mary and American Sign Language certification from Gallaudet University. So Kathy will be our first presenter. Our second presenter will be James Sawyer. James serves as Executive Director for InnovAge's Richmond PACE Center in Richmond, Virginia. James has spent over 20 years working in the healthcare field with extensive experience providing care to seniors and those with developmental disabilities. Prior to joining the team at Richmond, James was Executive Director at InnovAge's Blue Ridge PACE Center. Previously, James served as a center director for life programs in Pennsylvania, where he provided operational oversight and worked to increase the number of participants in the program. James received his MSW from Temple University, his MBA from Eastern University, and is currently pursuing a master's degree in healthcare administration. Outside of InnovAge, James sits on the board of directors for several organizations in both Pennsylvania and Virginia. And now I will turn this over to our first presenter, to Kathy Massey.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Regina. I appreciate that introduction. And I also appreciate the audience here today from across Virginia and frankly, from across the US. Last week, the American Medical Association released a publication that I thought was very interesting, especially in light of our webinar today. The name of it was Social Isolation and Loneliness for Older Americans. And it also followed up in talking about opportunities for healthcare and health systems related to this. So this publication is written from a healthcare point of view, and it had a couple of statistics, the only two statistics I will use today. One will not surprise you. It indicated that 40% of older adults report to their doctor that they live in loneliness. And I don't mean just a little bit lonely. I mean, it is an issue that they are reporting to their physician. And a little more surprising to me was that at the same time, 21% of caregivers report that they are living alone or feeling alone, at any rate, feeling alone. Now, this was prior to a pandemic, so we know that that has only increased since many of us are feeling somewhat social isolated now at different times. Of course, Regina did a great job of saying what the results will be: depression, anxiety, and much worse as the deterioration of that three-legged stool occurs. But today, my role is to tell you a few things that we have done about it here at Bay Aging. As a AAA, we have always been very aware of isolation and loneliness. And so our Meals on Wheels program, the tagline is more than a meal, because it's so much more important at times that people have that friendly visit. They know someone is coming. They know there will be contact. That is as important, probably, or more important in many circumstances, as the meal itself. Also, our senior centers. Senior centers seem to have waned in popularity in some areas, but here, for those who do attend the center, they are very, very committed to that center. The people they see when they go to the center, that is their family. Those are their friends. And so it amazed me that even with the pandemic and all the fear, I've had complaints from the seniors that said, forget the pandemic, we want that senior center open, we want to be with their friends. And so I think that just underscores the need for this integration and what kind of social beings we are. And as Regina said, well, the pandemic has put a whole new meaning onto social isolation. So today I'll give you a few of the ideas that we have had here at Bay Aging. You will find that they are simple, basic, community-based ideas that any of you can replicate at any time, and you can probably improve upon as you go along. So please send me your feedback on how we can be improving on this. Out the gate, local governments, some of our local civic groups, others came to us and said, what are you going to do? This pandemic really is targeting older people. especially at the beginning. That was the one big thrust that we knew about. So what are you going to do? How are you going to respond? And our team here at Bay Aging, we got together and we set two priorities. One was we knew we needed to find some programming that would help connect people to each other, to us, out into the community. And I'm not talking about just our senior apartments or people receiving our services. I'm talking about the community at large, people who had never before perhaps felt isolated or been homebound. So we needed to reach all of them. And number two, one thing especially important to our health department and such, what can you do to help people remain at home, to make sure that people don't have to go out any more than absolutely necessary? And so what we did was to found a website that we've named it Helping Neighbors. And Helping Neighbors website is twofold. It is a place where volunteers can check in and say, hey, I'm available to volunteer, but also anyone with a need could write in and express their need and request our assistance. And I want to say here, it was a website, and that's where most of the contact came, but in every communication, we also put out a telephone number because we're in a rural area. Not everyone even has connectivity, much less perhaps some issues with equipment and using the equipment. So in Helping Neighbors, it wasn't long before we could see that people wanted help. They wanted more meals, beyond Meals on Wheels. They needed groceries, they needed pharmacy, they needed friends. And as we were trying to sort through this, one of the big worries was we covered 2,600 square rural miles, and how would we ever address all of the need that we thought would be coming? But what was most amazing is that early on, we were inundated with volunteers. We had more volunteers than we had things for volunteers to do. So we used that well, I think, and we also, as we publicized this, got the word out on Facebook, websites, newspapers, whatever type of communication train with Rotaries, others that would spread the word. We let it be known. All of our local governments, we let it be known that we had this service available. Perhaps the most popular of the services that came through this Helping Neighbors was the dinner meals. 2 hot restaurant prepared dinner meals a week. And then we would circulate around where these meals would be served. In a few weeks' time, we had 900 individuals signed up wanting these meals. They were very popular. They were very good and tasty. In addition, we did some additional checking on people because these meals came only twice a week, and it was more expensive than our traditional meals. But the other part of that was it helped the local economy. We bought the meals from the restaurants in the neighborhoods to also give their bottom line a little bump up. Volunteers loved it. They got to know some of the people they were working with, took them some baked goods in some circumstances, and would also bring them things that they may need, some cleaning supplies, and as you will all remember, that all important toilet paper. So we had quite a network going there, and the only criteria was that you're 60 years of age or older, and that you are really working to self-isolate. That was it. But we expanded because we already had Meals on Wheels clients. Some of them also wanted this program, additional meals. And yet at the same time, we wanted to do more than just the feeding. We wanted more interaction than just the visits. So we did things such as a virtual May Day. In the month of May, we set up a number of virtual types of activities, such as let's let your senior center group all go to the Metropolitan Museum of Fine Art, or you've seen them, you can hear the symphony. And frankly, it's the only time I think any of our senior groups ever went together to a national park to go hiking. So it was very well received. And we also, though, realized we don't want to just be virtual. Again, not everybody has that connectivity. So along with that, we next developed the Growing Together program, where we distributed hundreds of flower seed packets, encouraging people to get out and get some fresh air, get in the sunshine, plant the flower seeds, a little exercise. So that was hopefully helpful. And then we asked for some photographs of the flowers growing. We also said, if not, use some of the art supplies we distributed and paint flowers, and otherwise be active and innovative. We had mobile food pantries for a while and delivering bags of groceries, complete meals and such. Those we have phased out because we've been very fortunate. The food banks around here are very active and offer to take care of it. So of course we have plenty to do and could move on to other things. I think that one of our big leaps was the telehealth. We've worked in telehealth for many years, but all of a sudden it was doing all of your intake work through telehealth. And for telehealth, it was everything from the simple using your smartphone to more sophisticated Zoom and such. So our coaches, our care coordinators, staff, they were teaching clients how to FaceTime, how to use the technology, and workarounds when there was no technology. So we could continue intake, we could continue the connection. And I think the bottom line with this was the lessons learned was keep changing it, keep trying new things, and keep evaluating. We do send out evaluations. We do ask for input, what you like about programs and services, what you don't, what else is needed, so that hopefully we can keep it fresh and keep going, because it does look like we're in it for the long haul. With that, there are some other technology interventions and social media things we've done, but I am going to defer now to James because my 10 minutes is up, but I'm glad to answer questions later in the program. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thanks to all who have joined our webinar. First, I would like to say thank you to Innovage for providing excellent service to our participants, not only here in Virginia, but across the nation and for other states. We approximately have over 6,000 participants who we serve. And when we started this pandemic, it was challenging, and I believe someone had mentioned that earlier during their discussion regarding how we could take the services out to our participants. And I would tell you that our participants seem to be very happy with the services that we're providing and how we are trying to keep them engaged, not only with the PACE team, but also with one another. So I wanted to share a couple of examples that we are currently utilizing, and then also talk about what we can do to continue those efforts. So right now, as Kathy stated earlier, that we are using different platforms that will help the participant remain in the home. And that is such as utilizing Zoom, utilizing the GrandPad. You know, I would often see the commercials regarding the GrandPad, and I really didn't have a firsthand experience until recently during this whole pandemic. And I will tell you that the product is user-friendly for our participants. I have heard nothing but positive things regarding the use of the technology. In addition to the GrandPad, we also have been using our own iPads. Now, you know, when we're dealing with seniors, we often think that our seniors do not have the ability to utilize such technology. But what I have found over these past couple of months, that they have surprised us. They can use it, they do know how to use it, and it's really up to us to try to figure out how we continue to bring that forward with our participants. And in fact, what I've noticed is that some of our participants have shown the staff members how to utilize some of their iPads because of, or their iPhones, because their grandchildren have showed them how to use the technology. In addition to using the grandpads and using other technologies, we continue to provide services in the home. And how we're doing that is our clinical team, when this whole pandemic started, we identified those top participants who would definitely be at risk if PACE didn't survive or if PACE wasn't there to provide that service for them. And as a result, we identified those participants. We went to their home. We provided therapy sessions for them as well. We would actually, and of course, we have the proper PPE on because we want to keep our staff members safe as well. But we would also take them out for walks in the community. We would continue to provide them with the services that are outlined in their care plan. That's really important because we all know as the pandemic at some point will lessen, we have regulatory responsibilities that we have to adhere. So we want to make sure that we continue those efforts as we move forward. In addition to the home visits, we continue to and somehow lost. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Let me get you back on here, James. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No problem.
You should have just gotten a request.
Okay.
You're back.
I'm back. I was getting so excited and it was starting to get good there, right? For some reason, can you see me at all, Martina?
Yep, you're good. We can see you and we can hear you.
Okay, all right. Also, in conjunction to our let me get back on track here. Grandpads utilizing technology. We also did wellness calls a couple of times during the week. In fact, we've had some of our participants ask us to please stop because we're calling so often. But the key is, the reason why we felt the need to continue to keep calling on our participants and to make sure that they are okay, because some of our participants, we're the only families that they have. And we wanted to make sure that they are not socially isolated during this time period. So with that being said, we've called multiple times during the week. In addition to calls, we've had meetings as well, virtual meetings with our participants. We've also had Bible study. We continue to have Bible study with our participants, as well as activities that we send home to our participants to keep their mind stimulated. We also make sure that we have our chaplain chats. The one beauty with PACE programs is that we also provide the spiritual care as well. So with our seniors, we know that that's very important for us to meet the needs of their spiritual health. So as a result, we have weekly chaplain chats where our participants could call in. They could actually, from their religious perspective, talk with the chaplain and meet their spiritual needs. In addition to that, the one thing that I do want to note when our participants, because sometimes this can be overwhelming. So there are other things that we have that we put in place to make sure that we're meeting their needs, such as other community resources. linking them to other resources in our community, such as churches, is really important to make sure that we do not forget about churches, and also, figuring out what matters to our participant, and that could just be as simple as a neighbor. And really trying to draw in that neighbor to provide them with the additional support. We talk about social media a lot, and I often like to share a story because I think stories tell it all. So, we have a participant, and this person was experiencing depression. And of course, we picked up on this during the participant's initial assessment. And in order for us to determine the person's depression, there's a tool that we used. And this participant's depression scale was pretty much off the charts. So as a result, we continued to work with this participant as her PACE provider, and that worked out well. But we still couldn't get to the underlying issue. We provided medications, we've done everything that we possibly could do. And as a result, what we did, or what we found, was that the person was just socially isolated. And we came up with an idea with that participant, what will work for you? And that participant told us, I really want to figure out, I haven't seen my friend in over 50 years. And as a result, I would like to learn how to create a Facebook page. So as a result, the participant, with support, created a Facebook page and found her friend of 50 years. Well, can you imagine, not seeing your friend for over 50 years and then having that rekindled relationship that you haven't seen or heard from each other in over 50 years. And that was so powerful. So this person no longer was socially isolated, because she was also connected with her friend of 50 years in conjunction to the PACE program and the services that we provided. That's pretty much some of the things that we do on a daily basis as a PACE program. The one thing that I do want to also note is that, all the PACE programs here in Virginia collaborate with each other, or at least on a bi-weekly basis, to really share some of those best practices. But what I've been doing here in the Richmond market is looking beyond just PACE services and looking at those in the community, and figuring out how we could also share some of those best practices with, as someone stated earlier, adult day programs, senior centers, and other community-based programs. Thank you so much. Again, I appreciate being part of this virtual experience, and thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Again, if you have questions, please post those in the question box. We do have one question, and Kathy, this one is for you. Can you provide the citation for the 2 data points? 40% of older adults report to their doctor that they live in loneliness. And number 2, 21% of caregivers report that they feel alone. Thank you. That is through Patricia Rohr from Fairfax County Health Department. Thank you, Patricia, for your question. Kathy, would you like to respond?
Yes, it is in the National Academies Press, and the citation, if you have your pencil handy, if not, this is recorded, so you can always come back and grab it. But it's like the HTTP thing, and then nap.edu/25663. And I promise this wasn't rehearsed. It's just that I thought it was an obvious question, but you are so good to have thought to ask it. So thank you for asking and giving me that opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. And also, James, one of the questions that we may have had that people haven't put out there yet, but I will ask to you.
Sure.
It's that we all know that PACE provides medical care, the primary medical care. How did you all do this during this pandemic? Did you bring them into your center? Did you provide this in the home mainly, or did you bring them in one or two at a time into your medical clinic?
Excellent question. I just want to make sure that you all can hear me. Yes, can you hear me? Okay, great. When we initially started, we started our census, we reduced our census to, depending on the center and the size and the participants' accrualty level. And that helped us to determine if that person needed to come in a couple of days during the week at the beginning. So initially, we were still bringing participants in. Our census was reduced to meet the need. And then as the pandemic became worse, we decided that it would be best for PACE to provide the service in the person's home. Of course, taking a look at the person's care plan, figuring out their needs based from that care plan as well, and providing the care. So some of the care consists of the home care services. We would provide physical therapy in the home. We would also provide any occupational therapy if needed to the person's home, any wound care, which was it's very important to make sure that we meet their clinical needs.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information. I cannot see the questions, so I am here in just a second. I'm going to turn this back over to Martina so that she can ask
and
questions.
I'll just read some questions because I don't need my video on to do that. We have a question saying, can you state the name of the organizations represented by the presenters? And also, I will remind everybody that the recording of the presentation with speaker information will go out after this, but Regina Sayers is with Appalachian Agency for Senior Citizens, one of the triple area agencies on aging. Kathy Massey is with Bay Aging, which is another area agency on aging, and James Sawyer is with Innovate Age PACE. That's a mouthful, James. I'm messing it up. Richmond. But we'll get links and bios out to everybody again afterwards. Let me move to the next question. Kathy mentioned the new study and report on older adults and social isolations. Kathy, to confirm, is that the same one that you just referenced? And we could include that in the follow-up email as well, because people seem to be very interested in that. So thank you for that question. We will definitely include that. Let's see. Question for James Sawyer. What are you doing specifically for the very old who can't leave their homes for outdoor activities?
We are taking the activities to them. We have wonderful activities department here within PACE. And what we typically do is we create activity packets that we send to the participants' home. And then we also identify some of those participants who would require or ask for additional activities. And we will send our activities person, of course, they have the proper PPE, to the person's home. For an example, we have this one lady who loves to play the piano, and if you would go to her home, she's not going to allow you out until she plays the piano. So, we recognize a staff member who loves music. That person went over to the home, allowed the participant to play the piano, and it was pretty much a win-win on both sides, because that participant had the ability to one, no longer be socially isolated because she had someone there with her who could talk with her, who would listen to her music at the same time, but they would sing together and just enjoy the activity.
Great. As a follow-up to that, James, we got a question regarding your grand pads. How many of your clients are using that?
So right now we have a total of we have over 200 participants, and of course we don't have 200 grant pads, but as an organization per site we've ordered 2, and it rotates. So depending on the participants' need, and like I stated earlier, some of our participants, they do have iPhones and they're capable of utilizing their iPhones, but some of those who do not absolutely have anything and would need assistance, they would use the grant pad. So as of now, we kind of rotate that through participants as needed. If there's any assessments or anything medical that we need to deal with from a telehealth perspective.
Great. And then as a follow-up kind of on the numbers question, Kathy, how many people have you had attend the virtual field trips?
Honestly, I don't know. I'll be glad to look it up. But on the field trips and such, the way they were joining in, I haven't received a report on that, and I don't know. There's probably a way to find out. But I know that the invitations and opportunities went out to hundreds of people, and how many took advantage, I don't know. And frankly, I'm not sure we can know, because when we sent out some of those invitations, people did not have to RSVP to us. If they didn't want to go during a specific time frame, they could choose a different time. So we made opportunities available. I would like to add one other thing, though, about these wonderful opportunities that obviously everyone listening today could take advantage of. But one of the interesting things in that study I referenced was about the caution of making many virtual opportunities available to people who cannot access them, and that can actually exacerbate depression and feeling of loneliness. Not only am I all alone, but I can't go on the field trip or do those things that others are doing. So it may sound like common sense, but it really rang true to me, which is why we work so hard to make sure there are other options where you don't need the technology.
Absolutely. Regina, this is, I think, more directed. I think this is a question that you should answer. What is the future prospect of having a PACE program in Southwest Virginia, in the Southwest Virginia area, beyond the Roanoke service area?
I am happy to announce that Appalachian Agency, we actually serve Buchanan, Dixon, Russell, and Tazewell County, which is Cumberland Plateau Planning District. There was an RFA for the Washington Smith, Wythe, and Bland community, which is in District 3, which is the new the Mount Rogers service area, and Appalachian Agency did apply for that RFA. So if we do have that opportunity, then we should hear something that was due in June 15th, and we are just waiting to hear from DMAS. So that was put in. So we are looking to expand, because we are so very close to each other. Even though we're far away, we're still close enough to each other to offer those services in that community as well. And we receive phone calls almost at least weekly, if not daily, for people wanting to be in the program. Because I think people, one of the things I will reiterate what both Kathy and James have said, is that keeping seniors in their home, especially during a pandemic, is the safest place for them. Absolutely. And working with their families to let them know that we're here. Our staff, I know James and Kathy and all the AAA staff have been very diligent about making sure that we are following universal precautions and protocols, and all of those are being put in place as well. And Martina, if you don't mind, there is one thing that I do want to tell everybody that's on here today, talking about social isolation. We had a couple to meet in our PACE program, and guess what, guys? We're planning a wedding for them on August 21st.
Oh, great.
So we are so excited that we are going to be able to offer them that opportunity It's going to be a very small wedding. We will have tents outdoors here at our agency for them. But isn't it wonderful that these programs have brought people together, just as bringing those two friends together after many years, then we have brought people together. And I will tell you, the one individual, when he joined our program, all he could talk about was his pain. And once he met this beautiful young lady, his pain disappeared. So social isolation really, there is a lot of true effects to that. So anyway, but thank you, Martina, for asking that question and for allowing me to share that wonderful story about our upcoming wedding.
And I think this is a great follow-up question for each of you in each of your respective areas. What are you, as well as others listening, and we'll send a survey out for people to give feedback and share resources. So keep this in mind for everybody listening. Planning to keep doing in the new normal. So what are some of those new programs that you've kind of instituted through this that you're going to keep doing? And it says, in other words, what programs will you continue even after a vaccine is widely used and people can be more actively engaged with each other?
Well, I'll go first, and I don't know specifically what we'll do and not do, and I don't want to just create something, but I do know that we ran out of funding that was given early on in the pandemic for the food program for the Helping Neighbors. And yet, as we talked and it became so popular, our counties have taken over funding it. Now, if the pandemic is gone and everybody's healthy, I don't know that they would continue, but they have for the next 6 months committed to fund that program because it's been good with the restaurants and people have raved about it. So something different, but something that we will keep.
I think for me, that actually has been impressive with during this whole pandemic is when our CMO and CEO meets with our participants and caregivers to assure them that they are here to listen, to provide support, but also to solicit their ideas and hear what input they have within our organization and how the new normal will be moving forward. So that's something I think that we will continue to do. And I think that it seemed to work in my opinion.
Martina, if you want me to answer that, one of the things that we hope to continue to do is to continue with telehealth and telemedicine and just telecommute for our individuals. We had a grant, a telemedicine grant that we received just a month or two ago, and unfortunately we have been unable to purchase the equipment. Everything is on back order, but we were going to make sure that every one of our nutrition sites in our 4-county area are hooked up through some type of telehealth program as well. And so I do feel like that remote monitoring of our individuals in their homes, especially with PACE, that we will want to expand on that program and expand those opportunities as because if people can get to a nutrition site, then we could potentially provide that telehealth for them so that they would not have to travel outside of our community. Because like Kathy, we are very rural and it's very difficult for us. We do not have a lot of specialists in our community. So I think that that's going to be something that's really going forward, even when it's not a pandemic, is going to be very important, is to be able to have that ability to communicate with our physicians and other providers as well, even physical therapy and do chair aerobics and all of those things. I've found that through Zoom, we can really do a lot. And even my husband is going to be doing speech therapy through Zoom as well. So there's a lot of things that we can do, using telehealth.
I agree.
The next question we have is, anyone aware of funding streams or grants for technology for seniors, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic?
There have
I
been
think
some HRSA grants, and then I'm trying to think of some of the other funding sources, but there have been some major grants awarded. And if you want, I'll be glad to see if I can find it, because I know our Telehealth Association has looked into that. And we benefited from some of them. We got all these Zoom licenses, and that's something we'll continue. Zoom, Zoom, Zoom everywhere you go. But really, there have been a lot of efficiencies, and I think our staff have enjoyed at times being able to Zoom rather than get on the road and lose so much time, plus pollute the atmosphere with driving around. So, but I can look for that, and we'll send it to Martina to post if there are others other than the HRSA.
Absolutely.
also, Martina, we have the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. Tell them to look for those telemedicine grants through them, or telehealth grants through USDA, and the Department of Housing and Community Development. Excuse me. They are also looking at telehealth to be used in some of these housing projects. So there could be some funding available through that as well. And I would, like Kathy said, I would look at some of these other foundations, the Rosalind Carter and some others that are looking at going, whoa, wait a minute, we need more telehealth. And so they may be willing to provide those funds for something like telehealth going forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
James, we had two questions. I'm going to put it into one. First is the InnovAge PACE program here in Richmond accepting new clients? But then there was also one, let me make sure that I'm reading this correctly. Is PACE actually doing testing for seniors in efforts to be proactive about their health status and work with them to identify any potential problems during the pandemic?
So the testing, are we relating that to the COVID-19, or are we just saying?
Yeah. Are you offering the testing for older adults to be proactive, to ease their concerns, and be proactive in identifying health needs before residents become sick?
Yes.
Are you being proactive about the testing, I guess?
Yes. So yes, I will answer both questions. The first question, yes, we are still enrolling participants. The goal is, there's so many potential participants who are in need of community-based services. And we are finding that more than ever, they need our care, they need our support. And I think this pandemic has pretty much opened up their eyes and the point of view of, okay, I really need these services so that I can remain in my home. The other question, for our testing, we do provide testing for our participants to be proactive. We are currently purchasing other testing machines that will better assist us as well. So it's yes and yes to both questions.
Okay, great. Kathy, are there specific questions that you're asking the population that you work with regarding social isolation to determine if that's what they're experiencing?
No, and probably we should ask more. We do ask, the general questions when we call. There are some excellent trainings available to be better at this, but we weren't aware when we first got started. So now we're looking into some of the kits that are available to train people just to be conversational, just for friendly calls. So more of it was what you would imagine at first. Hi, how are you? how are you doing? What are your needs? And by pressing more on some of the follow-up questions and good active listening skills, we did find some interesting things. For example, sort of indirect isolation. In one of the homes where we were asking about isolation, and the woman was talking about she couldn't talk to anyone, even though she had a phone. She was having all these issues. She needed a hearing aid. So that is something that hadn't been spoken. So yes, I do think that we need to keep refining our techniques to find out what the needs are, but we're doing just a general intake about who they are, what are their needs, and how they're doing, and then trying to respond as much as possible one-on-one.
Great. We have a few minutes left, so I got a couple more questions for you guys. One's around volunteers. Kathy, you mentioned volunteers, and this is both to Kathy and to James. So what kind of screening Kathy, are you using to identify volunteers, or when volunteers come in, what kind of screening process are you using? But then James, also, are you using volunteers to assist with visiting your participants?
We have had hundreds, thousands of folks that have volunteered during the pandemic, and we could not screen them. There was not time to do the criminal background checks and things that we may normally have been tempted to do. What we have done is to put on the website and on every communication that went out about the service, we put the disclaimer that we are not screening these folks. And so we make sure that the client who is receiving a service is aware of this. We have been fortunate, knock on wood, that there haven't been issues. This would not normally be our desired approach, but it was something that we really needed to do in order to get the food, the meals, and other things out quickly.
Mm-hmm. And in reference to the PACE program, here we are not utilizing volunteers at this point. And the reason being is because due to, from a regulatory standpoint, we have to treat our volunteers just like they're our own staff, and there are requirements that they have to have. So we're not utilizing volunteers right now, and it doesn't necessarily mean that in the future that we will not, but at this point we are not.
Okay. One of the questions that just came in is anyone using telephone-based engagement for those who do not have access to smartphones or computers or Wi-Fi, such as Henrico County's Engage at Home program? Because we've talked about before that Wi-Fi is an issue, and access to Wi-Fi is an issue in certain parts of the state. So is anybody using programs like that?
Yes.
Yes. And one of the things that we can do, that we will continue to do, is, for example, on an intake, we may get as much information as we can by telephone, and then actually use FedEx to send paperwork. The VA has been more flexible on this, as have other service providers, that we can send them, do this virtually, and then mail the paperwork back and forth. We're also using DocuSign and other things for those who have the technology, but if not, it hasn't stopped us.
Yep, and I would agree with you, Kathy.
Regina, what are you guys doing in Southwest Virginia?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me? Okay. We actually, each one of our nutrition site managers actually calls on a weekly, if not daily basis, their attendees, and they have set up lunch phone calls that they all have lunch together. They during lunch they'll all call in together, and they will have talk about what they've had for lunch. I think that they've even been playing a little bingo over the phone. I'm not real sure how they're doing it, but they are doing some bingo over the phone. These are the things that they wanted to do. Yes, the telephone in our remote area is just very, very important, because many of our individuals don't have broadband or access to broadband or to smartphones. So it has been very important, and as well as our employees that are working remotely are also making those phone calls, or they're doing drops at the home. We've even found individuals, like Kathy said, that if they didn't have a phone, we've been able to find work, see if a straight talk would work for them. But we've also contacted our like Verizon in our area, and have asked them to go and set up phone systems that maybe somebody didn't have a landline and everything. So we've been very busy, and the phone again. I guess they really wish they had the old party line back,
Right.
back in the of us remember the party line, and some of ours would have loved to have had that party line so that they could all talk to each other. So there's a lot to be said about technology going forward. Sometimes we're going backwards too. So, but yes, those are some of the things that we're doing. And of course, we're providing art and activities and everything in the home. I wish I had some of the art projects here to show you in the home. And we have also used our Facebook for videos. We are teaching people how to can through videos on our Facebook page. Those will be available. We have also been doing videos of what's available here at the agency for people to do. And there's a new one that's up now, and it's quilting. And we have a quilters group called the Plum Creek Quilters, and they are teaching people how to quilt at home. So all of those things that people have access to Facebook. And as James said, give our seniors a little credit. They know a little more technology than we sometimes want them, than we think they do. So even their families are helping them to do this as well. So a lot of the things, our registered dietitian even was on there to teach them how to do a quick breakfast, and our physical therapist has even done some exercises. So we're continuing to use our Facebook, our social media, our webpage, to get those ideas and those activities and everything out there to those individuals.
All right. Well, thank you, Regina. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, James. We are right at 2 o'clock, and we want to be conscious of everybody's time. So thank you again to all three of you for joining us on this webinar. And we look forward to having everybody with us next week, or next month, on August 25th to talk about social isolation in long-term care facilities. So that's August 25th from 1 to 2 o'clock. And as we have said before, this is recorded, and this afternoon you'll get an email with a link to the recording and contact information for our speakers. And I know there were some questions that didn't get answered, so we'll try our best to follow up on some of those questions and leave you space to ask some more questions in the survey that we send following the webinar. So thanks to each of you, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Thank you.